the modeling, and the layout phase. So the next step after that the concept is done, I'm laying out and blocking out roughly where the objects in the scenes are. I start by estimating what is where, especially in the background. This is an opportunity for me to spot what will need attention and what will not need attention. Now, by doing the layout, I can actually spot all of the weakness from the concept. Even if you photo bash pictures, it's still pictures and it's not actually real. So by actually going in the shot with actual geometry, I will see what will need to be corrected. It is pretty much the same for most of the concept. You will work from a concept or from a sketch or anything, and because it is hand-drawn, they are photos. Well, it will be a bit incorrect, compared to the actual physical reality of what the object is inside of the 3D scene. But the very first thing I do when I block out, after aligning my camera with with the concept, is I do start with cubes. Those very simple geometric shape, cubes, rectangles, sphere. You'll see later on when I'll be doing the trash bags. I do sculpt, but it's a very quick sculpt, and it's still mostly spheres. That's how I'll lay them out. I'll start with very simple pieces. Those objects that I'm laying out, those cubes, they will occupy a certain space in 3D. And that space will actually tell me how much the final object will roughly, just occupy in the scene. So for the garbage bags, I did go into ZBrush and sculpt them really quickly. Something really rough. That would be pretty much the shape of what would the garbage bag be. And I quickly just remeshed the bags really quick. This is just for me to have a physical representation in the scene. Working with simple shapes, only with primitives at the very beginning of the process, it is really quick, and it also it allows me to make very quick decisions. So I can move them around if something doesn't work, or something needs to be bigger, for example. Then it's just a sphere, it's just a cube. It's easy to manipulate, easy to transform, easy to visualize really quick. It's not very detailed. It's not detailed at all, actually, but it will let me know how I can place my objects, how I can actually do the layout before starting modeling in detail. So those primitive shapes, they're all like templates of each objects that later on I will actually use them to model within that template. I don't always model. Sometimes when possible, if I do have the object, even if it's a very rough, or even if the model is, I got it from somewhere else or from someone else, and I know that I won't be using it in the end, I can still use that, place it in the scene, because it's just layout. This is just for me to say, so this object is that big and it's actually placed here. It will actually let me know a bit more accurately how am I gonna push these elements further in the scene, if possible. Sometimes it's not, so that's why I'm using mostly cubes when you mostly create everything in the scene, if you have to. I loaded my concept as an image plane, so I could lay out the elements as precisely as I can. This is as good as it gets. It will look different because, well, we bashed a bunch of different photos with different perspective together, and all that made a new image. So it is expected that this will look different. For example, the buildings in the backgrounds, where they will be different because the perspective is different. The camera angles is a bit different, and the camera lens especially will deform differently. So it will change. It will not look exactly the same, but the spirit will be there. As is to matching the reference, that's very important. It's important that you match what either the client, the director, the supervisor wants you to match. If you provide a concept, you also have to match it. Obviously, that's pretty important. Although this doesn't mean that the director or the client, whoever it is, will change their mind as soon as they see it in 3D. That happens to me before, where they see something in the concept, they love it. We do it in 3D with the team, and then what happens is he was actually expecting something else because the concept looks like something because it's 2D and it's not 3D. It's not painted. It's rendered with physical lights, real world measurements and all that. So it will look real, more real than the painting. So that might be on the fly. That might be asked of you to be changed. That's part of the game. So I'm following as much as I can my concept. I'm trying to do not many changes in the layout. Right now, I'm actually trying not to do anything different than what is in the painting. But I will have to change a couple of things. Even on the walls, perspective might be a bit off or might be a bit different than what it is because of the different lens that I was trying before and the final one that I actually picked. I'm cutting my walls and the ground according to what I planned. I might keep some of it. I might not keep some parts of the wall or the floor. But I'm doing this especially with more attention in the foreground because this is what's going to be the most visible. This shot here is static and there's no character that interacts with the ground, so which means no shadows and there's no contact with CG. So I can be a bit more free here. But how this could be planned is the foreground, if we had other interaction, the foreground could be CG. If we had a plate and if it was live action, then this would be actually the plate. So in the foreground we will incorporate more CG for that piece. In the middle ground and the background, it could only be all matte painting because it's pretty far from us, and it allows us to take a bit more freedom on actually painting it instead of doing it in 3D. But the way I like to do it is to do all that in 3D, render, and paint over that. Paint over the CG that I have. Even if I don't keep any of the CG and I actually end up replacing it with pictures, it is still a very strong base for you to start on. It will allow you to see the lighting, information, where's the light direction going, that kind of stuff. Even if you end up not using it, it is still very useful. Right now, for the background buildings, I'm same thing. I'm just using very simple cubes to indicate where the buildings are, trying to match the reference as much as possible. I am now prepping the ground for my sculpting. From the reference, I would look at it closely, and what I noticed is this floor does actually have several sections. So basically, I'm dividing them. I'm cutting them all in different sections, like it is on the painting. What am I doing now is just blocking out the different parts, where all those parts will be taken later into ZBrush. And what I'm doing now is just making them ready to be sculpted on. Like I said in the intro, this workshop will show you a workflow. So when you come into that stage, and for example, you're watching this chapter, and you're like, oh, actually, I would like to learn ZBrush because for my project, maybe I would need to use ZBrush. So what I suggest is you look into the Numen library and you just pick, the ZBrush section or the sculpting section or the modeling section where they will actually teach you how to do that properly. An actual workshop that lasts for 3 hours, and for 3 hours, the instructor shows you what it is to model and sculpt. Now that I have my layout in place and I feel that it's pretty solid, I can now move into the next step, which is modeling. I'm really modeling to, make a final piece or a final asset for my scene. So for this piece, especially when it comes to sculpting, what I like to do is to make the surface uneven. So I will just sculpt slightly on the entire surface to basically make it imperfect, not perfect. That's important, especially when we try to reproduce something in CG. Making it look good or making it look believable and kill that CG aspect. How are you going to do this? So you're going to fix this by making everything not perfect, because CG gives you perfect lighting, gives you perfect edges. That is what's going to kill how believable your work is, basically. Especially for floors and grounds. Everybody is stepping on it. Everybody is actually walking on it. Heavy objects such as cars or motorcycles, or they're driving on the floor, on the ground. People are throwing things, liquid, objects, anything. So all that will make that floor very not perfect and very unbalanced. And that's what's going to make it real. That's what's going to make it believable. So looking at your material and looking at what's the history and how it's being built, what happened in the lifespan of that piece, what happened to it. So for this project, I modeled the elements that are closer to the camera a bit more detailed, although since I knew that I would be retouching the renders with paint overs, I still left a little bit of room for that. I would model the asset to a certain point, not making it perfect at any point. Sorry. This would allow me to, not spend too much time on one thing, and that will allow me to keep moving forward and make the shot evolve faster. Basically, I'm going to cheat a lot in this shot. I'm moderately working in 3D and moderately working the paint overs as well. But this is just one example. This is just one way of working, and this shot allows me to do this. Some other shots and projects that you might be working on, you might need to be using more 3D. If the camera has more complex movements, then you will obviously have a different strategy than just doing what I do here, for example. So it all depends. Every cases are very different. Sometimes I worked on projects where I was only doing my painting, exclusively my painting. That could happen too. It depends on what they need as well, Also, when I model, I'm trying to UV at the same time, depending on how complex the piece is. If it's simple enough to do it in Maya, then I'll just do it in Maya. Otherwise, I'll go and use HADES, the UV layout. I usually use a combination of both. I found that sometimes you don't need to go into HADES. You don't need to jump from another software. Sometimes doing it in Maya, it just works fine. So I'll basically use both for my UVs. So UVing and modeling the assets and everything, it's very time consuming. So in the concept itself, what I try to do already also is to make sure that there's a lot of things that I could reuse, a lot of recycling that I could do in 3D. So a lot of the objects are pretty much the same, it's just they have variations on them. I planned ahead to make the work easier and more fun. I really wanted to have fun with this and make the work easy for me. So that's how I planned it. One thing you need to know is I did not model all of the elements in the scene, especially if I do have the assets ready and available. I will not model it. There's no point to do it, especially if you're working on a shot at a studio. If they have the asset, you will not model it. You will not texture it. You will, if it's provided, you will just use it and put it in the shot and render. There's no need to do something that has been done already. So what you need to do is to, be efficient, work fast. And the same, if you start sometimes if you start a shot and there's you're not sure, and you can always check, and that's what I do. I always check if the assets is already available or not. So I don't waste time. I just go for it from the get-go. Now, for a personal project, that doesn't matter. If you do want to do everything, that's totally fine. It's probably better if you can do everything. Just model everything, texture everything, making it all look good. It'll be a bonus point for you. But also, if you want to be faster and you have the asset that you modeled before, you can reuse it as well. So it's all about that.